Okay, so into the afternoon session, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Pragashni, who is going to talk about tutoring. So over to you, Pragashni. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. And as Michael has said, I'll be sharing with you today tutoring at the bottom of the curve and its implications for recruitment, training, and practice in STEM crisis contexts. So all of those very confusing or unexplained terms will become evident soon during this presentation. I first must start by saying what an important role tutors play in the teaching and learning context. And I'm sure that you must agree that that is so. And that they are key intermediaries between student learning and the academic curriculum. So they have an invaluable contribution to make to the teaching and learning space. In South Africa, let me give you a little bit of what happens there, and we can share whether this, you have similar experiences. We have a very diverse cohort or profile of students, and together with our past and contemporary inequalities, that creates a very resource-intensive teaching and learning space. And it's a space where tutors fill the gaps so well and help with things like student learning, student success, and student well-being. Okay, so this, I must confess, is a very new area of research for me, and I'll tell you how I came upon it. I acquired significant South African Department of Higher Education and Training funding to run a University of Cape Town tutor development program. And part of the brief of the program is to come up with a tutor training curriculum that services all the faculties and all the spaces at the University of Cape Town. The other part of the project houses several specialized initiatives, we call them, spaces where tutoring happens. For example, the numeracy center, the writing center, a writing lab, multilingual education project, and the focus of this talk today, the Tutored Reassessment Programme, which I'll call the TRPs going forward, which is situated in the Faculty of Engineering and the Built Environment. So I've already acknowledged the DHET funding through the University Capacity Development Grant, which doesn't necessarily favor research. However, we've inserted research into this project because research informs practice, right? So we wanted to see what happens in the tutoring space and how we can share what happens in the tutoring space to other spaces, in the university. So this is a collaboration with colleagues Shanali Govender and Lara Karassellos, both who work at the University of Cape Town and both members of the Tutor Development Programme, which I lead. Right, so this is how I'll tell the story. So I'm going to be using the actual voices of the TRP week, quotations, and this one pretty much says it all. We walk with students through the valley towards recovery. So this is the tutor-led journey from failure towards recovery, taking students who have failed a final exam and helping them or accompanying them towards this recovery. So the quotations will be quotations of this crisis week that we speak about. And we're going to be using the visual metaphor of the curve where the dip reflects failure. The valley is the TRP week, and then tutors lift students through the valley. So if you like, it's not do not look at it as a report, rather look at it as a story of tutoring at the bottom of this curve. Okay, so all the details, if you'd like to know the research report that you can read in the conference proceedings. Okay, so how did this research come about? In engineering, first year physics and mathematics are load-bearing courses. A failure in any one of them shifts the entire program. And generally, these courses are prerequisites for other engineering courses and can set a student back anything between 6 months to a year. And that causes a lot of problems, including delaying graduation, students drop out of the program, their financial implications, and not to mention that there are also problems with confidence. Okay, so this is the reason why, and we call it a progression bottleneck. So students can't go anywhere after that further into the engineering program. And that is why the TRPs matter here. They compress recovery and allow students to re-enter the very tightly sequenced engineering program in no time. Okay, so what is a TRP then? A TRP is generally a 1 week, mostly 1 week, and sometimes 3, tutoring sprint, which takes students that have failed an exam and are failed between a particular band, 40 to 44. Okay, those students that have 50 and above have passed the exam. Those students that have 45 to 49 will automatically get to write a supplementary exam. But the students that have between 40 to 44 then have the privilege of attending the TRP. With the catch, though, attendance is mandatory, so you will only be able to access the exam if you've attended the crisis week, so to speak, or the Valley Week. So compressed timelines changes the job for tutors. It definitely requires them to diagnose misconceptions really quickly. There's an expectation for them to recover key concepts and to start to rebuild students' confidence, all in the time clock of a week. Okay, and here, the student is the tutor is reminding students to take the failing as a signal, and because you can always come back. And here's the thing. These students have come into a program and they've gone through very stringent selection procedures. This is a very highly regarded engineering program. They would have got top grades in schools to be able to enter this. So can you imagine the shock of failing? So there is that at play. Shock, there's pride, and there's the pressure of this imminent week that they have to catch up on the concepts and then write an exam. So the tutor's first job is not the content. It is to make failure discussable. So we will have to wrap their heads around what it means to fail well, what it means to come back from that failure, to understand where they've gone wrong, to build up the confidence really quickly. So content is not the first thing to be handled. So tutors normalize this dip, saying it's okay, we have failed, let's take a breath and regroup. And then they plan this climb. So we have developed the extended tutor capacity framework, which we use to describe the work that tutors do during that week. And the research question is pretty simple. the question we asked was, how do tutors experience and enact practice in these crisis-driven TRPs? Please bear in mind that this entire week is tutor-driven. There are no lecturers involved in this. So lecturers would have kind of daily 5-minute huddles just to get a sense of what's happening, what's working, what is challenging. But other than that, tutors run the entire show. Okay, and so the lens, and not only were we interested in the experience, we wanted to see what did that mean for recruitment, who we recruit for the job. What does that mean for training? How do we train them? And what does that mean for the practice during that week? Okay, so the lens that we use, as I've mentioned, is the extended tutor capacity framework, which consists of disciplinary, pedagogical, psychosocial, technological, and all of this is framed by what we call the critical ethical awareness, care, fairness, positionality. If you like, we can look at it like this, look at critical ethical awareness as the tutor's internal compass, asking questions like, when do I push? When do I pause? Who do I attend to first? And what counts as fair today? So those kinds of reflections. Okay, and so I'm not going to go into the detail of this. This is in the paper, all of the literature. Just suffice it to say that this was adapted from the very well-known TPAC, but this is adapted for the tutoring situation. So how did we gather the data? So prior to the TRP, which is that Valley Week, we had 9 tutor interviews, tutors involved in teaching programs that were on courses that were on the TRP. Tutors were trained, and the training, observation, and field notes from the discussions, from the reflections were recorded. During the TRP, we asked tutors to send voice notes of reflection on what they were experiencing, what they were doing, how their practice changed. And 31 voice notes over 5 days from 7 tutors were received, together with observations of those sessions. So we had people sit in and observe, and there were field notes from the TRP sessions. And post the TRP was a focus group interview with 5 tutors, and that is where all the data came from. Okay, and so the findings. The first one, and we're looking through the lens of the extended tutor capacity framework, is the disciplinary. So here, if you look at the quotation, the tutor is telling students not to just take the equations at face value, but to understand the context within which these equations exist. So in other words, what world are we in is the first consideration. And so it's context before computation, because when students experience failure, we find that their default is to go back to procedure and not necessarily understanding. And so the tutor then re-anchors this engineering sense-making so concepts stick again. And now that we have the context all sorted, one needs to then ask ourselves, how do the tutors help students probe what the misunderstandings are, where the misconceptions are, getting now back to then the pedagogical and diagnosis. So how do we shift the practices of what tutors normally do in a tutorial to what is happening here in this week? And if you look at the first one, it's deprogramming rote. So students come with their memorize and repeat habits. and one needs to then say, this is not going to work here. We will need to have a different approach to how we do this. So tutors take them through that. What happens is in the whiteboard choreography, I think I missed that little when I said that I should have said it earlier, that the TRPs take the form of mostly group work on whiteboards and on discussion, small group discussions. So this whiteboard choreography is where tutors are saying that they stand back, watch what students do, probe them so that the actual, the sort of unpacking of the misconception comes through from them. That, they have then an awareness of where they're going wrong. And then the tutor steps in and then says, let's locate what the misconception is. Let's try to name what the misconception is. Let's try to connect it to something that we've done before. Okay, and then the micro moves that tutors have to negotiate. Can you explain your method? What step do you think you are most uncomfortable with? What misconception do you think arose out of this? Can you name it? So those kind of micro moves that the tutors have to then display, because it's not about giving an answer. That is not going to solve the problem of tutoring in that week to write a re-exam. Okay. And then, none of this is going to work if the person behind the error is in free fall. So one has to then think about the psychosocial identity and belonging. One has to recognize that this is a first-time fail and that these students are dealing with a lot of other issues before that we need to address before we push the content. So a tutor needs an awareness of that. So in a sense, tutors carry the content and the confidence together. If learning does not take place, if there's no psychosocial safety, there needs to be a trust, there needs to be a recognition that this is what is happening to them. So in a sense, failing now becomes a bridge, not a bruise. Okay, and then the critical ethical awareness that tutors need is about situated judgment. As I said before, what is fair today? What language do I use? Who do I attend to first? The quiet 44% in the corner or the very loud group of 48s? So all of those things that would need some kind of reflection and some kind of prompting. So in other words, tutors are peers with authority, mediating inequality, hope, and standards all at once. So what do TRPs demand? Because that's exactly what we want to find out. Tutors became diagnosticians, mentors, and mediators, all under severe time pressure. To repeat, cognitive uptake depends on psychosocial safety. Tutors work in these micro judgments that I've been telling you about. When to probe, when to stand back, when to connect, when to push, when to pause, and to reframe failure so that it is not something that is detrimental, because in engineering, a failure can feel like, hopelessness. So the CEA guides this fairness and care in real time. And the question we wanted to ask then, what are the implications for recruitment, training, and practice? So for recruitment, the suggestion is to look beyond just the grades of the tutor. Look for somebody who displays empathy, resilience, diagnostic ability. The lived experience of struggle and recovery is very important. Some of our best tutors are those who have failed and have gone through that recovery. That understanding, I think, is very precious in their communication with students at that point. And then select bridge builders, those that can bridge between the abstract and the applied understanding. What are the implications for training? Do not separate cognitive, psychosocial, and critical awareness. Train the tutor, integrate all of these concepts to train the tutor. Teach how to do diagnostic questioning. How many of us who've had tutors actually take that for granted, that this individual who is a student themselves will know this. They need to be prompted. Okay, so the tutors that tutor on the TRPs are senior undergraduate students or postgraduate students. But nevertheless, they are students, haven't had any teaching experience or haven't had any teaching diplomas. Where am I? Yes, create reflective spaces on positionality and the school-university gap so that lecturer-tutor huddle, the regular reflection, is a wonderful space for lecturers and tutors to share what is happening and to discuss things like positionality and the school-university gap and what implications that holds for their tutoring. And then for practice, our students only understand the currency of marks. And so we need to have ungraded, low-stakes activities to normalize the productive struggle. Yes, it's okay to get something wrong. This is how we learn. And you don't need to have marks. So it's understanding before marks. And then once again, the tutor-lecturer feedback loops on these regular day-to-day huddles are invaluable in developing tutors to do their work. And then use simple tech to extend collaboration. Tech, we found, wasn't a big player in this week because it was such a compressed time. This tech was just for communication and very quick things, but it didn't play a huge role. So in closing, being a tutor in this space is carrying both the content and students' confidence at once. If you like, holding rigor in one hand and hope in the other. That's what it means to tutor at the bottom of the curve. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Pragashni. Any questions or comments? Chris.
Six questions. The students, actually, first, my last question first. I might have missed it because I came in late. What's the impact of the program? Now, the students that we have in the 40 to 44 range, I would characterise as qualitatively steps away from passing a unit. Can that really be fixed in 1 to 3 weeks? And maybe most importantly, what implications are there for the students prior to failing? So in the, how can we implement any lessons from here in the before they failed?
Yeah. That's a very good question. Thank you. So the first part of the question first, if I may address it, and Anita has been involved with the TRPs as well for many years, so maybe if I'm missing anything, she'll jump in. We haven't done any impact studies, but I can tell you what has happened this semester because the results have just come in this morning. And so there were 7, and I can talk about the course that I teach, which is the vector calculus course. And so there were 7 students in the category 40 to 44. Well, students get to that point for various reasons. They're doing an engineering degree. It is an extremely tightly packed curriculum. They might have had other things happen to them along the way. So, and as I said, they are very, very, they're an extremely bright lot that we get into the program. So we give them a second chance. And in the results of my course, 7 took this opportunity and 1 didn't, were presented this opportunity. 1 did not attend, and the other 6 passed extremely well. So in the 80%. So obviously they came to the party and they really, towed the line. The second part of your question is the difficult one. What do we do during the semester? And there are a whole bunch of things, because I'm thinking about, I said low stakes. I mean, I think all our assessments are so highly grade oriented. I don't know to what extent that encourages students to go the rote way, to not, to do superficial work, to understand superficially. And then, of course, performance in the exam then is, related to that. I suppose that could be one way of doing it. And then maybe we were looking at this particular research, and this is about tutoring in a crisis situation. But I wonder what lessons this holds for tutoring in a normal space, because more and more students are experiencing difficulty on all kinds of fronts other than disciplinary. So I'm thinking that tutor training should embrace the things that I've just showed, not just in the crisis week, but for normal tutoring. Does that answer the question? Yeah.
And it's so great to hear the important role of the tutors do.
Mm.
And add to your comments now, some of my students are actually Thank you. Yep, I can hear myself now. To add to your comment just now, some of my students are in crisis this semester.
Yeah.
And the things that you mentioned about the things that we're looking for in the tutors, I think that's what I want in my classroom all semester long as well.
Yeah.
In terms of the recruitment, do you have any kind of advice or suggestions for choosing or finding tutors who have that empathy and those soft skills, I guess, that you're looking for?
Yeah, that's a difficult one if you do not have like sort of a prior knowledge of the tutors, either as your postgrad students or somebody that you've taught along the way. I'll tell you what we did for this particular. In the past, there was no training given. So what we did was we had it was a 3-hour training session where we raised these types of issues. So not just pedagogy, psychosocial, all kinds of issues with these tutors. And I think that part of and I know this is not about the recruitment because they'd already been recruited through the program and we were training this group. And during the TRPs, if you saw the data was collected, they were doing reflections. And I'd like to think that those reflections with the lecturer or whatever they were reflecting on was part of their development as well. And in many cases, those same students go on to tutor in the next semester. So they're continuously developing. I don't know how to answer the question about how do we look for empathy. I suppose we could give, sort of like have a little interview kind of setup where you give for instance, how would you handle something like this? Or I suppose that might give them a case study and say, well, how would you deal with a student that is experiencing this kind of issue? Or what would you do in that? What would be fair? So just like that, those types of questions might work. As I said, I'm very new to the research myself, but we intend to get more into this because it's a 3-year, very well-funded project. So anybody wanting to tell me about their tutors or collaborate, I'd be happy to.
Michael's obviously gone to something else, so if there's more questions, perhaps at afternoon tea, but for now, thanks to Pragashni for that talk.
Yes.